What's going on, Digital Wildcatters? Welcome to another week of BDE, Big Digital Energy, here with Chuck Yates, Mr. T, the white version, Mr. T, and Kirk Coburn. Kirk, where's your chains at?
I left him in the car.
Okay.
Didn't want to compete with Chuck.
I rolled him, took him.
Chuck said that the sweatshirt out is, look, the hoodie out. It's out.
I think so, man. I think Sam and Fetterman have just totally killed the hoodie. I don't know how I can do it anymore. They usurped my look.
Were you here the other day when Anoop, the founder of Pangea Charging, was here? He had a necklace on with the company's logo. He got it from Johnny Dang.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
It was actually like way cheaper than I thought. He's like, how much do you think it costs? I was like, I don't know, 20 grand. He's like, no, $200. I was like, damn, I didn't know you could go in there for $200.
Dude, let's do some digital wildcatter bling.
Yeah.
I want to grill. Can we just go ahead and grill it out?
Let's grill.
I'll
I
wear
want
a
a frac
digital
slap. I want a
wildcatter
frac
grill.
slap grill.
There
That's
we
like
go. Frack.
Yeah. Once I have a liquidation event, I'm buying a blinged out frac slap grill.
So speaking of degenerates, you were on a roll about this story this morning, so we'll start it off. So Moore County, North Carolina, 45,000 people don't have power right now because somebody went and shot up a bunch of substations in what appears to be a coordinated terrorist attack of some sort. What say you, Frack Slap?
Yeah, there's a conspiracy theory out on the internet that it had something to do with a drag show. And like there was a bunch of like public resistance to that. And so they're saying, is it just coincidence that the substations got shut out? I don't think that there's probably any tie there, but it does show you how fragile our grid is, that someone with a just a 223 rifle can go in full of critical components, and all of a sudden 50,000 people are without power. And it's funny, this actually reminds me of a story. So I was one time, it's actually one of my very first energy podcasts I ever recorded, was with I believe she was the CFO of Solaris Midstream, and she was just talking about infrastructure safety out in the oil fields, especially pipelines. And she's talking about the damage that they take to pipelines. I'm like, yeah, you have a bunch of rednecks like me that go around shooting them. And she's like, oh, I don't think that happens. Like, no, I'm telling you that happens. Like, we do it. Yeah. You're talking to someone that did that type of shit when we were kids. So always, I think with it being like coordinated on 2 or 3 different substations, I mean, it's malicious. I don't think anyone would go around to 3 different sites.
The fact that they knew which substations, the fact that they actually knew what a substation actually is and does and where it is means that there was coordination there.
Yeah. I mean, there's some element of thinking there that you know what it is, the location. And so, you see the term being thrown around, terrorism, which I do think is terrorism. I mean, 50,000 people without power. And I imagine weather's like in North Carolina now, but I imagine it's pretty cold.
Well, that's the big thing here. Second order effects, wastewater pumps don't work. That's bad. Traffic lights don't work. That's bad. And people can't heat their houses. They interviewed some guy. It was kind of classic on the news. And it's like, what are you doing right now? He goes, man, my house is 55 degrees. I'm eating cold ham.
Yeah. Well, you saw last week here in Houston with the water treatment plant going out due to a power shortage and had a boil water notice for 2 or 3 days. Just how much
terrorism?
I think that was incompetence.
I wasn't alluding to terrorism. I was just saying, like,
I just want to throw it out, but definitely incompetence for sure.
It wreaked havoc on the community, though. And I mean, that was just losing water. And so a community like,
and what most Houstonians ask is, why don't they have a generator? Like, hello. Yeah. We all have generators.
We're the home of the energy business.
I mean, you look at it, HEB, who's by far my favorite company to ever exist. They have their own microgrids that they've started building at their big stores where you have these huge nat gas. They either have cycled generators, but some of them I think have full-on turbines too. So yeah, HEB can do this and be prepared for power outages, but our government, municipalities,
we need food, man.
Well, and Kirk, we used to do this back before Colin and Julie over there. I used to do little video clips to introduce each story, and we used to do something called the underappreciated story. We had this cool little video clip and all, but anyway, the key with deaths from cold, like when you have a heat wave, people die like the next day, right? Cold causes you, particularly old people, to die, but like in 15 to 30 days. It's not like you sit there and you freeze, but if your house is too cold and it's at 55 degrees instead of, 68 or whatever for a couple of weeks, your blood flow constricts. It doesn't go to the extremities, which leads to higher blood pressure, which leads to a heart attack.
Cold, the
etc.
slow killer.
Yeah, cold is the slow killer. So, 15, 30 days from now, if we see some deaths pop up in Moore County, they're not going to get reported. It's not going to be tied together that this was a thing, but it is a thing and something we need to watch.
Yeah, I retweeted the news article about the substations getting shut out, and some rando Hanon account on Twitter is like, "Oh, great, publicly telling people how to, destroy energy infrastructure." I'm like, God, I can't do anything right on Twitter without someone
That's right.
bitching at me.
That's why Twitter's so good.
Yeah, that's what I love it though.
Well, there are 55,000 substations in the United States, and I saw an article somewhere that I forget what the number was, but it was like take out 200 of them, you could literally shut down half of the United States. I mean, it's if you know exactly the right ones to hit,
Yeah,
you could bring it down, and they're just outside.
No, I mean,
not
and
like-
it doesn't cost anything.
As the consumer,
One bullet's 50 cents.
we complain about grid stability. But when you think about the business model, my first stock that I ever owned was Houston Lighting and Power. My grandmother bought it for me, and I made some money off that. But the business model for these guys is they take, our payment, and they turn around, they invest as little as they can into infrastructure because they're trying to make a profit.
Yeah.
And I know they're regulated, most of them, except here in Texas and a few other places, 13 states. But it's a hard business model because they have a lot of money into the infrastructure unless they're being paid to do it. So we have a weak infrastructure.
Well, it's the same misaligned incentives that you saw in oil and gas with Winter Storm Uri. And, people are like, well, oil and gas companies need to weatherize equipment. I'm like, where's the incentive for them to do that? You're talking about CapEx and possibly OpEx increases that go along with that, and they're not paid for it. They're not rewarded for it. And I don't know.
Only ExxonMobil over engineers everything. So
yeah. So
Not anymore.
completely thinking about systems where you can realign incentives is important. And I think like one easy way to do that, not easy, but one way to start working towards that is dual metering, to where, hey, if you
love the idea.
Yeah, I have solar and battery at my house. I have excess capacity. I can now sell into the grid and get paid for that energy. And so starting to like rethink how our grid is built and incentivized is probably.
The UK is doing that now, and it's actually real interesting because in the UK, what they're offering a tariff to the consumer that we're going to buy power from you at a guaranteed price. Now, retail electricity providers over there are fighting for what's the highest tariff they'll offer, because they'll say one retailer will say, I'm going to offer you £5, let's say. The other one will say, well, I'm going to offer you £6. Well, now they're guaranteed. And what's interesting is when you have this guaranteed tariff, the retailer is legally obligated to buy that power from you, period, which has created a lot of risk. And now they're saying, okay, well, we need to offload that risk to someone else. And that's why, at least in the UK, they're trying to figure out, well, how can I allow consumers to trade amongst themselves to regulate my risk, which is interesting. And I've been a big fan of sort of where Europe's ahead of us on thinking through this.
Yeah.
But I've always thought that sort of local energy communities is the way to go.
Oh yeah.
But the problem is the grid operators are slowing it down.
Yeah, you need peer-to-peer
Oh my God,
networks.
we can't take electricity. The whole grid will shut down. That's their testimony before any regulatory body is. Well, it'll shut down, and no, it won't.
On this point, you see like all these smart devices, like a Nest, for example,
right,
that are smart thermostats. And I love getting on Twitter and you start seeing people bitch anytime that Texas has peak demand, because all of a sudden their thermostat starts, the AC starts getting turned off, and they're like, I didn't authorize this. Like, why is my house 75, 77 degrees? but people's behavior would change so much more if you said, hey, we're going to pay you for this. So if you lower your energy consumption, we'll pay. So I think that that's interesting. I think that building out peer-to-peer markets where you can have more verticalized communities.
Wrote a whole paper on this, but
yeah, I love
another day.
So the energy policy draft I had a podcast where I had 8 people on and co-hosted. It was
8 people on or 8 people listening. Let's get it clear
I
here.
had 8 guests on, so probably 6 people.
10 people total.
10 people total.
I wish I was there.
Stacy McDonald and I co-hosted it, and it was kind of like the Chappelle racial draft. You know, you had one pick. If you were Energy Czar, what would you do? And Kyrie Baker out of she's at Colorado State, right? She's a professor there.
Yeah.
Her pick was exactly that. We need distributed generation, local
Absolutely.
networks. And that was her save the world thing. So
yeah, the have you seen what Tesla's doing out in California, their partnership with PG&E? Have y'all seen that with their bidirectional power? So you can get, if you have the Tesla
with their batteries.
Yeah, if you have the Tesla Powerwall at your house, you get the app, and then utility company comes and says, hey, it's 11 a.m. right now. We're expecting peak demand at 6 p.m. We're going to fill up your batteries, and then at 6 p.m. we're going to draw from them.
Right.
And we're going to pay you for that energy.
Well, I think Tesla, what they started in Australia with, which they wrote some software called an auto bidder that auto bids in the market for based on sort of demand, supply, and price of energy. And so Tesla's offering that to their customers, and I don't know where they're rolling it out, but it sounds like California. That to me is a game changer.
Yeah, I think so. So, but the biggest thing, like, you know, we always talk about oil and gas being dinosaurs when it comes to moving. I mean, utilities is like 10x.
Hey, when I was at Shell, I spent a lot of time on this area, and Shell's probably the largest. Them and BP are some of the largest traders of electricity in the United States. When Auto Bidder and Tesla started doing these things, I kept raising the alarm. Like, we have got to get our head in the game here. This is going to change, could change, but the problem is in the U.S. is that we move really slow regulatorily. Europe's moving a lot faster, which is kind of oxymoronic to some of us, but we should look at Europe to see what's happening, which is my first pro-European plug, isn't it?
I know I've actually gotten remarks from European friends. I'll just say it that way, so they show my name was that I'm so pessimistic on Europe and so down on Europe, and I'm not. I'm just like vis-a-vis expectations. You know, this brings up another point.
I want to talk about BP real quick, unless you got something that's like really important. All right, because I like dunking on BP all the time, so he brought them up. Did y'all see that they're ending their statistical review, their report that they've done for 70 years? Did y'all see this?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So, you know, they put out their
World Energy Facts.
They put out their annual energy report. They've done it for 70 to 75 years, and now they're talking about cutting it. And this article was on Reuters, I believe. And this is a quote from one company source. Put simply, the review is bad PR. It doesn't align with what their messaging is as a company, which the layman's terms is that reality in their energy report doesn't align with what they're saying as a company. And so found that to be very humorous.
It was very stunning how blunt they were about it.
Yeah, no,
it's like, we can't spin this data.
Yeah.
So we're just not going to share it with you.
That's exactly what
that
it was.
To me is, I mean, where's the courage in that?
There is no courage. And BP has this massive internal identity crisis where like, no, we're not an oil and gas company. We're a renewable energy company, which, hey, if you just want to be energy, like, that's great. But I mean, they have gone, you know, swung to the far side, and it's got to be confusing for all your oil and gas professionals that are in-house, like just being treated like the redheaded stepchild.
Let's do this on courage. Another thing that happened this week is Los Angeles came out and banned oil and gas production. So not future permits, not fracking. They're going into old wells and shutting it down. I guess they're going to go out to 90210 Beverly Hills High School and shut down that well bore that they have.
That's right.
Literally right on the middle of campus. And,
yeah,
you know, my whole take on that is, you want to show some courage? Why don't you ban consumption?
Let's do it.
You know, If you're not, if it's bad,
So I
don't
worked
use it.
on this well right in the middle of Los Angeles, and it was so interesting because it was in a suburb called Brea, and my stepmom's family was in town, and they live in Brea, and I'm like, oh, I'm actually going there in 2 weeks to work on this well. They're like, what? We had no idea that there was an oil field in Los Angeles, and I get there. And this well that I'm working on is on a golf course right at the end of a
Sweet.
driving range. And so we have this workover rig, and all these motherfuckers are hitting balls
I'd
at us.
be trying to
Yeah.
hit you for sure.
Absolutely. And anyways, major intersection, there's a pump jack right in this parking lot of this country club. And it's like, how do these people not know that there's oil field? And then, Brea is literally Spanish for tar. I get in my hotel, there's oil derrick paintings, like it's an old oil field town. And then you go out to some parts of LA, and it looks like eastern New Mexico, where it's just, hundreds of those small little, 4-foot pump jacks. Yeah. And so it's wild to me that they're saying, hey, no new permits, which that's understandable, but also just saying that you're going to shut it down. How do you factor in that risk when operating? And this actually goes to a bigger point. People online say that the feds haven't done anything to shut down oil and gas drilling. But it's sentiment. You invest all this capital in resources, you want to know that you have a environment that you can operate in and not have something like this happen where all of a sudden it's like, oh, you can't produce any of your current assets.
They're going the way of Germany, which Germany's like, let's shut down coal. And then they're saying, wait a minute, and let's shut down coal and nuclear.
And let's pay the South Africans not to do coal.
Let's pay the South Africans.
Yeah.
But let's be dependent on Russia for gas. This is we all love it. Who doesn't love the environment? So I'm a surfer. I love being outside. I love it. But what's ridiculous to me is when California says we'd rather put the environment over the health and well-being of our people. I think that's when the people revolt, because when they don't have power or they can't afford power, they're going to be pissed.
Well, two things.
And they're going to die, as we said.
One, they're not going to be without, right? To my point, they're not banning consumption. So all they did was push
increasing prices.
They increased prices. They pushed production to Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, all the places, and somehow pollution and stuff doesn't happen in Venezuela. It only happens in LA. So that's why they're banning this production. But to tell you how crazy it is, the Brea tar pits, we owned some of that field when I was at Kane, and we wound up selling it. But when we bought that field, the first thing our CEO wanted to do, because there are pools of oil everywhere, he was like, I want to send a vacuum truck out, clean up all the oil. And the lawyers are like, no, don't do it. And we're like, holy cow, what do you mean don't do it? And he goes, the second you run a vacuum truck over it and clean it up, you're admitting that you caused the problem, not that it's natural seepage. So we just can't touch it. So there are literally pools of oil out there, birds dying in the pool of oil because a lawyer is saying you can't do it. That's how crazy.
How many lawyers do we have listening to this podcast? Because let's tell them that, come on, guys.
Yeah,
but the lawyers were right, given what the government was saying. A prosecutor would have hauled you in and said,
if you look at all the renewable fuel deals, all the plants being built, it's focused primarily on California, because if you're making money, if you're producing oil and gas in California, you have to offset that oil and gas with the renewable energy credit. So that's why we have all these renewable fuel deals and going up all around the borders of California, because California is saying, look, we're trying to just ban anything that's dirty and bad for the environment. We're trying to ban it.
Renewable natural gas going into California is massive business. It's super lucrative right now. But it's interesting, talking about the regulatory, because that well that I worked on, I'm running an expandable casing patch, and we're covering a hole that, it had minimal bleed off on this pressure test for the well. Oklahoma, Texas, they would have passed that all day. And this company spending $400,000 to fix this problem on a well that was drilled in, I don't know, 70s, 80s. I was just like, I can't imagine that this well makes any amount of volume of oil. And so strict regulatory environment. But to your point, hey, shut down where we have strict regulatory environment on production and now import our stuff from jungles in South America or wherever it is. We need to get Mike Umbro on the show sometime.
Well,
He can.
Great idea.
You know what we actually need to do is, can we buy the oil wells for next to nothing since they're going to be shut down? So the answer to that's probably yes. And then have a fight with the government on takings. You know, you can't take property without remuneration, right? That's so it's going to be interesting to see what you get paid for shutting in that.
Well, speaking of Mike Umbro, he had a perfect tweet about this the other day because people are getting renewable or they're getting carbon credits for not cutting down a forest.
Yeah.
So this forest exists, you own it. We're not going to cut it down and we get carbon credits. He's like, how long until we start seeing this in oil and gas where people are buying assets, shutting it in and saying, hey, I get carbon credits.
That's already happening.
That's happening.
Already a thing.
Is it happening?
That's happening. That's happening already. You know, at least with carbon credits, what I will say is that's a voluntary exchange. Microsoft says they want to be carbon neutral and they want to go pay Joe Blow to shut in his wells. Okay. You know, we can agree whether it's a good thing, bad thing, but at least carbon credits are a voluntary transaction. It's when the government starts getting in the middle of that.
I've looked at a lot of these deals, by the way. And the regulatory markets have higher pricing. But the challenge is this is the accounting of all accounting. If you want to go look at something that makes no sense, the pricing of carbon credits, number one, it's always local and depending on the environment. So it depends where those trees or that forest is that someone doesn't want to cut down. We'll put an arbitrary price on the carbon credits. That market's still evolving, and I expect it to be 10 years before it makes any sense. But some people, sort of the wildcatters, hopefully will make out pretty well on misinformation.
Yeah, so
there's probably going to be huge arb market for what's going on because it's all made up, right? So who determines what the price is for
voluntary?
CO2?
It's you and me.
Yeah.
So we got a great quote. Even if you get paid to shut down the well, there's no way you get paid enough to do that. And that is at least what I have seen in the few deals I've seen that basically shut down, monetize the carbon credits, and you're getting like a 5 to 10% rate of return, which owning oil and gas is not appropriate, even if it's production.
And we talked last week about abandonment and what the cost. I mean, the cost that hasn't been fully realized. So I think that's interesting. What do you think, Colin? Because if you shut the well down, you still have the environmental impact of that well. It's still there. Yeah. It still could leak. It still could have problems.
No, it's still a liability, right?
It's a liability.
Sarah Stodgner is going to magically appear right here, right now, and lay it on us, right?
If you
zombie
say
wells
zombie wells 3 times, Sarah
fast
will appear. That's the legend I've heard. On this whole idea of carbon credits and carbon sequestration, we've talked about the whales and how important the whales are to sequestering CO2. Did y'all see this article from Bloomberg that was talking about offshore wind turbine farms killing whales?
Yeah, I did.
Killing whales.
Yeah. So have you heard of our whale theory? Have I told you that?
No, but are they running into the power under the lines underneath?
I don't know. I don't have a paid subscription to Bloomberg, so I couldn't read it all.
Bloomberg, send us the article. We'll tell people about it.
The good news about podcasts is we can say the same story over and over again. Yeah. Because what I realize is people don't listen to every single one of these.
Yeah, I don't remember shit about what we talked about, so I know no one else does.
I'm a Nantucketer, so whaling. I mean, when
a whale dies, it has sequestered probably about 33 tons of carbon within it. Even more importantly, about 40% of photosynthesis is because of plankton.
Yeah.
And the best thing to lead to plankton growth is whale shit.
Yeah.
That is the
so
best
wherever you have whales, you have high populations of plankton, and we've decimated the whale population over the last 100 to 200 years, killed 75% of the whales.
Unfortunately.
So literally one of our biggest components to the natural CO2 pump, biological pump, like we've decimated them. And so it's funny because I made a tweet yesterday. I said oil is the new oil, and someone's like, like, oh, the whales are ecstatic or whatever. I was like, don't worry, we're still killing them with wind.
Can we
wind
bring
turbines.
the whales back like we did the wolves?
So that's actually what Chuck and I spent some brain cells on how we get whales to start fucking and repopulating, essentially. And
Can we help
I
them?
asked Jewel if she would record an album of love songs for whales, and she hasn't spoken to me
so
since.
we started putting together an idea of an ethical SeaWorld and, and how we could
Barry
repopulate them.
White music.
It sounds like a Stephen Wright.
It's not that wild of an idea because you see VCs like Chris Sacca's Lower Carbon Ventures funding companies that are growing seaweed farms out in the ocean to be a carbon sink. And it's like, okay, how do we repopulate the oceans with whales and encourage that? And there's got to be, I don't know, there's got to be something there.
We should kill some brain cells on that. So one other soapbox, and I come up with stories so that I can wind you up. The new thing seems to be this artificial intelligence and get it to write your papers for you. I don't even know what it's called.
Yeah, OpenAI.
OpenAI created it. It's called
Yeah.
Chat GPT.
Yeah,
Is the
GPT-3 is the actual model.
Yeah, so I'm like sitting there looking at that. That must use some electricity.
Yeah. I actually just tweeted about this before we got on, so that's what people are going
I didn't
back
make
and
it
forth
up.
on
I read your tweet.
people are going back and forth on my comments because the founder of OpenAI, Sam, he tweeted the other day. He said that their server costs are eye-watering for OpenAI right now, and for the past year, but this has been a topic for the last few years. Everyone's super critical of energy spent on Bitcoin mining. And I think that one of the biggest threats to human progress is certain entities, whether it's governments, corporations, or whatever group of people, shutting down things like Bitcoin mining or AI because they think that it's a waste of energy and resources. And if we would have that same mindset back in the early 90s, think about what life would be like now if we didn't have the internet. And there was a case for it. A lot of people thought the internet was only good for pornography. They didn't see any useful utility out of the internet. And so as we get in a world where we're doing even more things with computers, I think people they have this in their mind that we've reached peak technology.
No.
And we're just getting started, right? And the amount of computing power that has to go to these AI apps. I mean, there's literally billion-dollar companies that have been built off of computing power that come into oil and gas because they're like, oh, you're doing all of this heavy lifting and seismic interpretation, and they build companies off of that idea. And so you look at what AI is going to do for the world, and this chat GPT-3 is fucking wild. Someone on EFT had I think it was GPT-2 bot, and it was me and like 10 other people. We were the inputs for it. It would just read our tweets, and it would spit back out energy tweets. And it wasn't just like it was changing the syntax of our words. It had its own nuance and context and like almost understanding of what it was saying. Like I didn't believe that it was a bot. I was like, there has to be a human behind this.
I think it's awesome, but let's go back. If we didn't have the internet, let's go back to the 80s.
Yeah.
Life wasn't too bad back then because I was alive. But let's go back to the world without oil and gas.
Yeah.
We would be fucked. Literally.
Mid 1800s.
It would suck. So let's just, let's put it in perspective. I was on a panel at South by Southwest. I had some oil and gas. This is pre-Shell when I was still independent. I had Shell and like BP guys, and there were protesters yelling, and there's probably 500 people in the audience. I just said, stop right there. Listen, how many of you have iPhones? Everyone. How many of you have iPads, computers? It was like your need for power continues to go up. So all of y'all searching for that next power outlet, and you're yelling at oil and gas that provides the power because you're pissed that we're destroying the environment, but you guys are the ones using more power.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Life expectancy was what in 1900? 40 years old, 45 years old, and today it's 75. Now, a lot of that is just getting rid of premature deaths of,
True.
But at the end of the day, basically each year we're alive, the life expectancy during me and you's lifetime has gone up about 2 to 3 months.
Yeah, I just think that one of the biggest threats to human progress is for the ability for certain entities to say, hey, you can't use energy on this. And actually, my friend Jason Jacobs had a good reply to this. He said, I tend to agree. Curious, though, how do you feel about local communities metering how much people can water their lawns during times of severe drought? Is that also overstepping, or are there times when guardrails are warranted? It's actually a really interesting talking point because for me, I grew up in the desert. Like, I think lawns are a waste of time and resources. I do not understand why people want green lawns. And I also think water is more precious and not priced properly.
Jacobs has a great point. I've always thought about this. It's the price of water is not priced effectively, because what we do is we abuse the water privilege. When there's a drought, I'm watering at 3 a.m, so no one knows, right?
Yeah.
But I think I've always thought about it. If commodities price accordingly, people might not water their lawns because it costs too much.
Yeah.
Technology
it's like the
will
typical,
come up with grass that'll grow with
the typical
10% of the water.
cliche dad going around turning off, the lights, saying, do y'all pay the electricity bill? Like, he's cognizant of how much electricity he's using because he has to pay it. So get your dads out there turning off the water.
My dad used to keep the house like 62 degrees. I mean, we could hang meat in the Yates house growing up, but somehow it was the light I left on in the bathroom
that pissed him off.
Caused the electric bill, Yeah. So I was like, "Come on, Dad."
I had a pretty popular tweet a couple of years ago. I said one of the most effective climate crusaders is dads telling kids to turn off their lights in their rooms. So doing the Lord's work and curbing energy consumption. But
man, always jack the AC to the lowest point, and we'd wake up with like all the windows would be fogged up. It was awesome.
So when I bought my house 7 years ago, the lady that had owned it before me she had run an event business out of it, so wedding receptions and
out of your house.
Yeah, I got a cool house.
Must be a big house, Chuck.
Party? It's a baller house. Now it's in downtown Richmond, so you gotta. But it was built in 1897.
You are a baller.
Too.
Look at the chains.
Exactly. No, so
he's the Mr. T of Richmond.
So she had been sick and she'd been living at her place in Austin or whatever. So the house kind of sitting there doing nothing, right? So anyway, I call HL&P and say, I need to set up electricity. And they look at it and they go, oh, we'll give you all the electricity you want for $500 a month. I'm like, man, that's really cool. So I jacked down my 10,000 square foot house to like 65
Hell
degrees.
Yeah, you did.
I have a Tesla, so I'm charging that. And my house is a sieve, right? I mean, it just
does it go, do you hear?
I mean, I'm like air conditioning all of downtown Richmond. And so anyway, at the end of the year, I get the letter from HL&P, call us, your contract's up and all this. I tell my assistant Stacy, I'm like, just call them and renew it. And Stacy calls up and says, yeah, Chuck would just like to renew it. And the lady's like, oh, I'm sure that'd be great. Oh my God, we can't do that. She goes, is he running a business there? What is he doing?
Marijuana, but
exactly.
We don't want to talk about that.
Like a illegal water well or something.
Oh
like
God,
off your
this
neighbor.
is great. So the other thing that happens is the inspection report basically said you have a lot that has a tinderbox on it. I mean, it's going to go up in flames any moment. So I had to change out all the electrical. So we're doing that. The guy goes out to the switch, turns it off, gets shocked inside the house, figures out Jackie was stealing electricity around the meter. That was number one. And so anyway, that was probably part of the issue. The other thing is my sprinkler system is running off this water well that's out in the backyard. And
not their problem.
Well, I'm talking to the mayor.
It's your well.
Small town. I'm talking to the mayor and I'm like, hey, Mayor, what do I do? I think I have an illegal water well in my backyard. And she goes, well, you sure as hell don't tell me about it.
That's right.
Like, all right. Sure thing, Evelyn. Didn't mean it. But
plausible deniability. Now you're covered.
Now I'm covered. Hey, one other thing before we do Finger of the Week. I found this interesting, and I don't know that I really have a good take on it, but Wall Street Journal just ran an article kind of showing a graph, and I forget, maybe the last 3 months or so. Energy stocks have continued to go up, but the commodities fallen off. So there's kind of this bifurcation. And usually, for whatever reason, oil and gas companies, the near month are like this.
Yeah.
And
because oil and gas companies make more money when commodity prices are high, and they make less money when commodity prices are low.
I mean, it makes sense,
but
right?
the dummy,
being the master of the obvious here, had to say it for those of you out there that don't know economics.
The dumb part of that is the duration of the cash flows of an oil and gas company if you told me it traded on the 4-year strip, I might say, oh, okay, well, that makes a lot more sense. But
Right.
it's always traded on the near month. But they've diverted. So I called around, and some stories I heard were, one, people are believing the energy story. It's not going away. Capital discipline's reigning. So people are actually willing to own the stocks now. And they say, hey, 75, 85, whatever, is still going to be profitable. I think there's probably an element of, the last couple of months of the year, if you're an index, if you're a fund of some sort, you got to report your quarterly holdings. You want to report that you own winners, right? So people are buying energy stocks because that's been the best performer. I think energy's up, 65% this year about. So I think it may be window dressing. Let's go sell the tech losers and put energy in there so we at least look good at the end of the quarter. But
yeah.
So the market's betting on expectations versus true pricing. They're saying that, hey, we're feeling bullish about, or we want to feel bullish about oil and gas stocks, so we're going to keep those high.
Well, I think it's interesting that it has tracked oil prices historically, but it's not like, if you want direct exposure to oil and gas prices, investing in E&Ps isn't really great because there's so many different factors. Operational efficiency, what is their hedge book?
They all hedge,
yeah, and so it shouldn't track oil prices in theory, but it always has. And so I don't know.
You know what's part of that is you can go out and trade on the NYMEX, and I mean, I'm a high net worth guy over at Morgan Stanley. They would not let me have a NYMEX trading account.
Yeah.
And I ran a private equity fund in oil and gas for 20 years. They finally let me, but it is not easy to just get a NYMEX trading account.
Yeah, someone called me out on that on Twitter. It's like, if you're so bullish, it was like when I had my Justin Bieber call of $200 oil. Like, if you're so bullish, why don't you go long on futures? I'm like, one, I don't fucking know how. That's not my skill set. Two, they won't let me, even if I wanted to. And I was like, they already got so much exposure to that through Digital Wildcatters. Like, I am long on energy.
Exactly. So anyway, that's something to watch, and maybe we can get Mark Meyer in here, Pickering in here, Brad Olson in here to talk more about that. Because I think
great idea.
Yeah, the decoupling of stock prices with energy prices will be something to watch. Do we have a finger of the week? Is that where we're at?
We do have a finger of the week. Here we go.
All right.
All right, this is Kirk's finger of the week. So Kirk, lay it on us.
Indonesia just banned sex outside of marriage. So the largest Muslim populated country in the world has banned sex outside of marriage, which includes foreigners. So
wow,
for those of you that want to take your girlfriends to Indonesia, beware.
Dude, is that a real thing? Like, you go there and you're not married and you have, like, I'm interested in this. I'm probably more interested in this.
Don't go there, I think is what we're saying.
I'm interested in the second order effects because, what constitutes marriage in the first, like, is Indonesia, is their idea of marriage the same as
good question
Americans? So, like, who dictates?
Could a gay couple, I mean, are they technically married in the eyes of the Indonesians? That's a good point.
That's why I give them the finger of the week.
I need to know before I go. So we need to get to the bottom of this.
Hey, Julie, I'm not even going to ask why Colin needs to know that. I don't judge. Whatever y'all do in your off time.
I take in as much information to keep myself out of a spot. I've never been to Indonesia.
I just know when I'm drunk in Vegas and grab the cocktail waitress, Indonesia's not on the, hey, sweetie, let's run away.
All right, so Indonesia got the finger of the week. I didn't know who it was this week. I wasn't expecting that. So that was a barn burner. I like that one. All right, I think that wraps up the show. And on that note, if you guys like the show, guys and girls, if you like the show, please share it with a friend. Share it on LinkedIn. Share a YouTube link, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you're on.
Subscribe
to us. All the
All the things you do
podcast
for podcasts
shit.
you like.
Help us out with that. And we will catch y'all next week, 10:30 a.m. Central. I don't think Chuck will be here. Maybe Kirk will be, but
Hell
I'll be
yeah.
here. We'll catch you.
And I think Mark Myers is in for sure next week.
All right.
So
Me, Mark, and Kirk.
Kurt.
Catch y'all
I'm
next
in.
week.